ओम नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. In our previous class, we were discussing the concept of Ishvara, what actually Ishvara is in according to the Sankhya philosophy. According to the Puranas, he is the ruler, he is the supreme ruler, the creator, and the preserver and the destroyer. So Ishvara has a triple role according to the Puranas, but here one should remember, according to Sankhya, there is no place for such a creator God. Then what do you mean by the Ishvara of the yogis? So that explanation is given in this 24th Sutra, where before that we remember, if you remember, we had discussed the Sutra 23, that success can be attained by devotion to Ishvara. Ishvara pranidhanat va means by devotion to Ishvara. So before trying to understand what is pranidhana, pranidhana means devotion. So you understand that we can have devotion, one can understand according to a Puranic god, an incarnation or a deity, we can have devotion to such a god with form. But Sankhya does not accept such a creator. Then what do you mean by devotion to that Ishvara? Who is that Ishvara? What does he do? What are his characteristics according to Sankhya, based on which the yoga philosophy is based? So the definition is now given in verse number 24. Klesha karma vipaka ashaya uh, ashayaihi paramrushtah purusha vishesha ishvara. So he is a purusha. As you know, there are two in according to Sankhya. There is a purusha who is pure consciousness, who is untouched by prakriti. He is the witness of prakriti, but he is not touched by the gunas of prakriti. When we are influenced by the gunas of prakriti, misery comes, happiness comes, different actions comes, results come, and other desires come. So klesha karma. Klesha means misery. Karma means actions. Vipaka means actually that which fructifies. Every action has a reaction, and every action gives rise to certain fruits. So those certain fruits which are a result of certain actions, by virtue of our actions, we give rise to certain results. They are known as vipaka. And then we have the desires. So these are the four things which normally a person who is a jiva, when he is under the influence of prakriti, has to undergo all these things. He undergoes some kind of misery, or that implies happiness. Misery is a relative thing. So when you say a person is happy, that is also a relative thing. For some people, that happiness may itself become misery. So he has not mentioned misery and happiness separately. Misery is the cause of sorrow, and all our actions. Otherwise, if we are always happy, if all our actions resulted only in happiness, then people would not have bothered about yoga at all. We don't need yoga then. If all our actions, good or bad, resulted in only happiness and no sorrow. But because there is sorrow, there is the opposite happiness. So we get some pieces, some portions of happiness because of our actions, and a similar amount or more amount of misery based on our actions. So the results of our actions are always mixed, and that is the nature of prakriti. If it is tamasic action, you will get misery. If it is a sattvic action, you might get pleasure, you might get joy. So depending on the proportion of sattva, rajas and tamas, anybody who is subject to prakriti will suffer from misery. So that is why Ishvara is a Purusha. We are all different Purushas, but unfortunately, we are mixed up with Prakriti. But Ishvara, according to Sankhya, I am not talking about Ishvara of Puranas. In Ishvara of Purana or Vedanta, there the Ishvara is the ruler. He is the ruler of the whole universe. But we must remember that here it is yoga philosophy, and Sankhya, God as the creator of the universe, is not meant by the Ishvara of the yogis. According to the Vedas, Ishvara is the creator of the universe. Because it is harmonious, it must be manifestation of one particular will, the cosmic will. Our individual wills are small parts of that cosmic will. And that is why we say Ishvara Ichha. Means it's the will of Ishvara. Because our will doesn't, however good our will, the will does not, we can't determine our future according to our will. We may will certain things, but our will is not as powerful of that of the Ishvara of the Vedas. Whereas Ishvara has the supreme will, and based on that, all the jivas, they have their own manifestation, jivas, and they manifest their small wills, which are however great the will may be. You may have some people with tremendous willpower, but he can't come anywhere near Ishvara. According to the Vedas, he is the creator. So everything is harmonious in the whole of creation. But when we go against that harmony, go against the natural laws of Prakriti, and we get attached in Prakriti because of the three gunas, preponderance of the different gunas, then our wills change and they become limited. They become contracted, as it were, and then we suffer. We want to be great, we want to be happy, but we don't get happiness. We get misery instead. So here, when he says, when Ishvara, according to Patanjali's yoga, is a special Purusha. He is not the creator or the destroyer or anything like the Vedas, but he is a special Purusha who has reached a state where he is untouched by misery, by any actions, their results, and also the desires. So the yogis wants to establish a god, but they arrive in a very peculiar fashion. They want to have a supreme Ishvara, but they don't accept a god as it is accepted in the Vedas. So they just give a different definition, not as a creator. So what is that definition? They say, Tatra Niratishayam Sarvagyatva Bijam. Now, in him, in that Ishvara, that of Sankhya or the Ishvara of yoga, everything becomes infinite, and that all knowingness, which in others is only a germ. So the only quality of Ishvara, not as a creator or destroyer or preserver, they say he has one quality which ordinary Purushas or ordinary Jivas don't have, and that is his all knowingness. He knows everything. He knows, he has unlimited knowledge. If it is possible, it's not possible for a human being, but it is possible for that Ishvara of the yogis. What does it mean? Now you see, mind always, here the idea of infinite, Swamiji is trying to explain in Raj Yoga. When you think infinite, what do you mean? If you tell God is infinite, it's just a word. What do you mean by infinite? Is he infinite in space? Is he infinite in time? Infinity can mean many things. Limited time means there is a time gap, say 3 hours, 5 hours, 1 yuga, even 100 yugas, but still it is not infinite. It is a finite time. It may start with a few hours, it may go to many years and then millions of ages, but still it is finite. So how to conceive this idea of infinite? You can think of limited space. Now you think of space. You think of the sky, but still there is an idea of space from the earth to the sky. So what is below the earth? Is there no space below, or is there no space around us? So can we conceive of an infinite space? So then Swamiji says, do one thing, close your eyes and think of a little space around you. At the same time, you perceive that little circle. You also can perceive, you suppose close your eyes and think of a circle around you. maybe as big as your house, or maybe say 10 meters around you. That you can definitely conceive of that space. The space which covers my garden. Suppose you sit in the garden and you conceive, close your eyes. For you, the space of the garden which you have just seen a few minutes ago, that you can perceive, that little circle of 10 meters. And then you imagine, Swamiji says this, how to imagine the infinite in space. It is a very difficult concept, but we have to understand this. Otherwise, infinite does not mean anything. It is just a word. I said, I believe in infinite space. Just think of an infinite space. What do you mean by that? So, but Swamiji gives us a hint how to imagine the infinite. So he says, start with a circle. According to your imagination, you have a circle which is, say, 10 meters. Then imagine a slightly bigger circle of bigger dimension. Then that way you go on and extend your imagination and say that there is a circle which is of unlimited dimension. Now, physically you can't conceive it. You have to just intellectually convince yourself that just as there is a limited 10-meter space, if you go on extending it, you can cover galaxies, you can cover, and then take it to the ultimate limit. Just you have to just imagine it. You can't visualize it. It has to be unlimited. Similarly, Swamiji says it is the same with time. Try to think of 1 second. We know the unit of time is if we have a clock now, tick 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 tick, every second it will the dial will show that 1 second is, or if it is a digital clock, you can see the seconds. So with the same act of perception, now try to think of several hours, then several ages. Just leave your imagination. Swamiji says, try to imagine that time also you are living in infinity. There's no beginning, no end. Stretch time both ways, just as you stretch space below, above, across galaxies, went on and on and on. Imagine that it is not ending anywhere. You can't create a circle anymore. You started with a 10-meter circle, so you are started with 1 hour. Then you try to imagine that if I extend that 1 hour, if I just eternally wait and wait, so that cannot happen in the gross. For that, you have to jump into the infinite. So also, Swamiji says, the Ishvara of yogis, they think that if you extend knowledge, now knowledge is only a germ. Sarvagyatva bijam. Sarvagyatva bijam means our knowledge. We have wonderful knowledge. Even the greatest amongst us has a limited knowledge. He may have a vast knowledge, but still it falls short of, he cannot claim to know everything. So now that is how they define Ishvara. It's a difficult concept, but you have to think about that. So I suppose the wisest of men has this much knowledge. Now, more wiser than that, there would be another person. So it is just a germ. However, that is why Isaac Newton, when he was walking on a beach, somebody asked him, he was one of the greatest scientists of his time. He took up a grain of sand. He said, I feel so humble that he said all my discoveries and everything at the end of his life, he just lifted a grain of sand. And he said, I sincerely feel that the knowledge I've acquired after so much of hard work, so many inventions and everything, it is just like this speck of sand. And you can imagine the whole beach is so much of sand. So compared to that unlimited knowledge, at least he had a glimpse of the infinite knowledge around him. Though he was by all practical, for all practical purposes, he was one of the wisest and most knowledgeable among persons, among the living people. But then even he felt so humble when he saw the sea. He says, my knowledge is like that. So also Master Mahashay, who wrote the gospel, he says Sri Ramakrishna's words and his thoughts and his ideas are vast, like a vast ocean. I was fortunate enough to be in his holy company and carry a jug full of that water from the sea. He is like a vast ocean or a vast sea. And I have managed to just collect one jug full. So that shows that a really knowledgeable person, when he's trying to acquire knowledge, when he's trying to become a yogi, the sarvagyatva, he understands that what I have, what a ordinary jiva has, a person who is aspiring to be a yogi, he takes the help of Ishvara, he meditates on the Ishvara, who is not infinite in the spatial sense. We discussed what infinite means as far as space is concerned, vastness. That is one infinite. There's another infinity in time, finite time, infinite time. We have to just use imagine. But here they say, imagine you have a germ of knowledge, bijam, sarvagyatva bijam, but tatra means there in Ishvara, there is no bija, there is no limited, it's not a germ anymore. It is a vast, infinite knowledge. He is sarvagyatva, means one who knows everything. Instantly, everything is known to him. Nothing is hidden from him. We have limitations in knowledge. We don't know the past, we don't know the future. That's why Sri Krishna says, he tells Arjuna, I see the past, present, and the future. Because he had attained to that Ishvaratva state, where the Sarvagyatva or the all-knowing nature of the Ishvara is manifest. That is possible only for the yogi. So, knowledge is only a germ in jivas, but according to the Sankhya Ishvara, that there is infinite knowledge. The very constitution of our mind, Swamiji says, my very constitution of our mind, since it is expandable, since its knowledge is expandable, it can be extended. The yogis claim. Whereas Vedanta says that you cannot become the Ishvara. Whereas here they say, if you get Sarvagyatva by going into the practicing the highest form of yoga, that unlimited knowledge is the God or the Ishvara of the yogis. That is the definition. Now we'll see verse number 26 or the sutra number 26, where Swamiji, Patanjali says, Sa purvesham api guruhu kalena avachedat. Avachedat means he is not limited by time. Now, from one side, from one aspect of infinity we discussed, that is all-knowingness. You have limited knowledge, Ishvara is unlimited knowledge. Now he comes to the time, and he says he is infinite even by time, because he is not limited by time. He is the teacher of even the ancient teachers. So you can't say that he learned from somebody. He is the teacher of that ancient teachers. So that is why Sri Krishna, in that high state of yoga, he is known as Yogacharya. Sri Krishna is known as Yogacharya. So according to Sri Krishna, according to Yogacharya, he says, I am the ancient teacher. Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram. You see the 9th and 10th chapters. He is expressing his glory. Because only in that state of yoga, they feel that the knowledge which even the ancient, which has come down through tradition, through succession of gurus, he is even beyond that. Kavim Puranam. Kavim means a wise man, a teacher of even ancient teachers. Sa Purvesham api Guruhu. He is the guru of gurus. If you go back in infinity, he is the teacher of even the most ancient of teachers, because he is not limited by time. Other teachers are limited by time. Other gurus, you may say, my guru is having that span. He taught me, and from this period, I became his disciple, and I am teaching the next generation. So all are bound by time, but he is not limited by time. So that is the second definition. First is his knowledge is not partial or restricted to little knowledge. His knowledge is infinite. And at the same time, he is not also limited by time. So these are the conceptions of Ishvara one has to remember. When you say Ishvara Pranidhanadva, by devotion to that Ishvara, so that means you have to be devoted to the Ishvara who is not limited by time. He is the teacher of even the ancient teachers. So it is true that all knowledge is within ourselves. Swamiji himself says in the beginning of Raj Yoga that all knowledge is within. Only you have to bring it out. The knowledge is restricted because of our ignorance, but it has to be called forth. It has to be brought out by another knowledge, the knowledge of meditation. Although the capacity to know is inside us, it must be called out. And that calling out of knowledge, that revealing of knowledge, can only be done by a yogi. And that can be done only through a superior knowledge. So it is like removing a thorn by another thorn. So you can't just, to get superior knowledge, you have to raise your knowledge, or you have to the capacity. If we want to unravel the knowledge which is covered due to ignorance, we know certain things, but we want to know more. So the yogi tries to know more, and that is done by a higher kind of knowledge. And that higher kind of knowledge is what we acquire through meditation. It is known as intuitive knowledge. A yogi maintains that it is done only through another higher intuitive knowledge, so that the lower knowledge can be negated or can be thought of as trivial. Oh, till now I thought, for example, when Galileo said the earth was round, people laughed at him. That was a higher knowledge which replaced the knowledge that earth was flat, because experience tells us that no matter how much we travel, we never see that curve. Unless you go leave the earth and see the earth from space, you can't see it as round. But because of mathematics and because of so many observation going to the horizon and seeing the curvature, Galileo said the earth is round. That is the most logical explanation. But people criticized him. He was put into jail. He said, how can you say? There are people who believed in those days of a earth which is flat. They didn't believe that earth was round. The earth could be round because the gravitation and all those things. So it is through the knowledge, higher knowledge of the earth being round, that the lower knowledge was negated, or the ignorance was removed. That is why in Prakriti also we find dead insentient matter never calls out knowledge. So the knowledge slowly dead. See, for example, a tree, or tree is at least alive. A stone, it is totally dull. It is insentient. There's no knowledge. It is the higher as you evolve, as the Prakriti evolves, then there is limited knowledge in the tree. In the animals, there is the reactive mind. It is a slightly superior knowledge. It knows things better than the plants. But when you come to the yogi, he has a intuitive knowledge, which is not just the reactive knowledge of the mind. So knowing beings must be with us to call forth what is in us. So these teachers are always necessary. So we have a teacher in kindergarten. We have a teacher. He teaches us, not that he is useless, but he has taught us certain alphabets and all. But then there should be a higher teacher who can take care of a higher kind of knowledge. So even the ancient knowledge which was there, it was constantly improved upon by newer and newer gurus. The world was never without them. Swamiji says, whenever the need is felt, whenever the vacuum is there, a new guru or a new teacher comes. And the world, no knowledge, according to Swamiji or according to Patanjali's yoga, cannot come with a superior knowledge. He has to come. That is why when we say Avatara Varishta, when Sri Ram Krishna, it's not that the gods evolve. Certain categories of saints or certain categories of wise men, they give a certain standard of knowledge. But there is always another superior knowledge which is waiting to be discovered. It is there inside. So we have these small gods, the angels, which give us limited knowledge, which take us to Swarga and all those things. They were all bound. They gave us happiness for some time. Some of them took you to Swarga. You went to different lokas and then you came back. Where God is not limited by that. So that is why the lower deities, Patanjali, that's why doesn't want to waste his time running after these ordinary smaller deities like fire god. Many gods were worshipped in the Vedas because some gods had certain powers. And we believed that if we want this, if we want wealth, we'll worship a deity known as Lakshmi. Or if you want something else, we will message, we will worship that uh, goddess or god, and we'll get that limited fruit for some time, but that is limited. These gods and angels and deities are limited, but whereas the Ishvara of the Param Purusha, the Purusha here, is not limited. He is all knowing, he is not limited by time. That is why he is known as the most ancient and the most supreme of teachers. Now, these are the two peculiar deductions of the yogis. The first is that thinking of the limited, the mind must think of the unlimited. See, this is a wonderful logic which Patanjali gives. He doesn't ask you to believe in God. He doesn't even ask you to believe in a Ishvara. I mean, in the sense in which Vedas tell him that the creator, because there is no proof. But here he just says, just study your own mind. If you have a limited mind, it is the same mind which has the conception of unlimited. He said, try. Anybody, any yogi, he says, is capable of conceiving or experiencing the unlimited. That is the greatest uh, deduction through logic of the yogis. They say if you can think of limited by time or by knowledge, but if you think of a Purusha or meditate on that Purusha or that Ishvara who is Sarvagnya, who knows everything instantly and who also is very ancient, it cannot be restricted by time. His jurisdiction is not limited to one yuga, like Yuga Avatara or something. He is beyond that. So he says the very fact that you have limited knowledge, but still the mind itself can conceive of the infinite. That is why Einstein, he once said, or I think I don't know whether it's Einstein, but at least Alexis Carrel said that he was a doctor. He said, what is the greatest gift that man has which other animals don't have? He says that the capacity of the mind to conceive or even discuss about the infinite. The word infinity doesn't mean anything to animals, nor does it mean anything to the plants, leave alone the inanimate objects. So he says only a man, though he may not reach that concept, he can extend or he can make a deduction based on his limited knowledge that this is a knowledge, this is a yuga, say 400, 4 lakh years. Then there is another yuga. Then what after that yuga? At least he can, though he may not reach it, he can perceive or he can conceive of the unlimited. So if the limited is true, according to deduction, says so also the other must be true. Because if you can conceive of something, it must be true, though you might not have reached it. The very fact that man has little knowledge, and if you posit a Ishvara who has unlimited knowledge, why can't I accept that reality? Though I may not perceive him now, or I might not become one with that Ishvara. But the Patanjali says, if you are really depending on your reason, because God has given us such a wonderful intellect and reason. So if you accept the limited, you also have to accept the unlimited. It is like accepting darkness. You have to accept light, because darkness is something which can be accepted only in relationship to light. If when you, the moment you say darkness, it implies that it is dark compared to a brighter object, light. So also unlimited is in relation to that limited knowledge which we struggle with. We struggle with limited knowledge, we struggle with our incompetencies, we struggle with our miseries, we struggle with our sorrow, because we want to be unlimited. We want to live eternally. We don't want to die. No person wants to die. But we find this body is limited. Then it says, okay, then this body is not the goal. Then they go to the Sukshma. There also say, okay, we go to heaven. If we do this, we will reach heaven. Then heaven also they enjoy. And then they find, oh, this heaven is also not permanent. Then the subtle Sukshma, then they go to the Karana. And there also they find there is no permanency. There is no eternal value. And when that happens, they realize that our knowledge was absolutely limited. And no matter, compared to ignorant beings, it was much vast. But we should not be egotistic, because that knowledge, someday or the other, somebody superior to us has got a higher knowledge. And if you extend that, if you go on extending mathematically also, if you can conceive of a all-knowing, omniscient, a person who is not bound by time, and if you meditate on that Ishvara, yogis say that that is the highest state of yoga. So if you admit that I am a man with limited knowledge, behind me or in the background, there is somebody with unlimited knowledge holding on to which I can aspire to increase my knowledge. That is the first deduction. And second deduction, from where the Guru Parampara has come, this graded knowledge gave rise to the idea that who will give me a higher knowledge? Who will teach me in the university? Who will teach me in PhD level? Somebody who is higher than the graduate teacher. If he is fit enough to teach me in graduation, and if I want to go ahead, if I want to do PhD, then I should go to a higher teacher. So this Guru Parampara is the second unique idea, according to Swamiji, which Patanjali has introduced. So as you deduce from lower knowledge to higher knowledge, from higher knowledge to still higher knowledge, from still higher knowledge to still higher knowledge. So that unlimited knowledge is something which a yogi aspires. And they say that for this you should have a Guru Parampara. So that is why there is a beautiful prayer, Yo Brahmanam Vidadati Purvam Yo Vai Vedanscha Prahinoti Tasmai Tamha Devam Atma Buddhi Prakasham Mumukshurvai Sharanam Aham Prapadde. I worship all the teachers, not one. Yo Brahmanam, the creator, the Ishvara. Of course, this is a Vedic prayer or a Puranic prayer. It's a Vedic prayer. Yo Brahmanam Vidadati Purvam Yo Vai Vedanscha Prahinoti. He was the one who gave rise to the Vedas, the most ancient of teachers. I worship him. That is a prayer which every student, when we were learning in the training center, our acharyas used to say, just that those acharyas believed that if one starts the class with this prayer, not for the sake of the student, he respects that acharya anyway, but the acharya should not think that I am teaching and there is nobody greater than me. So it is he who is keen to teach this prayer to the disciples. He says, Yo Brahmanam Vidadati Purvam, Yo Vai Vedanscha Prahinoti Tasmai. So I begin this class, I begin this Upanishad, or I begin this teaching with a prayer to the great, the most ancient of teachers who is ever knowing and who gave rise to the entire fund of knowledge or the entire universe of knowledge, the infinite knowledge. Tamha Devam Atma Buddhi Prakasham. Now who is that? One who Atma Buddhi. Atma Buddhi means here instead of Purusha, Vedanta says Atman. It is the same thing. Atman and Brahman or Purusha. So Atma Buddhi Prakasham means one who shines in my Buddhi. Tam Atma Buddhi Prakasham Mumukshuru Vai Sharanam Aham Prapadde. To such people who want to get freedom by realizing the Atman, realizing the great Purusha, realizing the great Ishvara, to become one with that Ishvara. That prayer is a famous prayer. So every teacher points out to some infinite teacher from whom all the teachers who have taught till now. So the whole sequence goes, the Guru Parampara goes to the most ancient of all teachers, who is this Ishvara. That is according to yoga. But even according to Vedanta, we accept a supreme teacher, the most ancient of all teachers. So just as the second deduction, as Swamiji says, the most important idea is that there is a chain of teachers and we Suppose you have a guru or you have a teacher. Now you have to accept that he had a teacher. Before that also there was a teacher. So when you go back in the Guru Parampara, you actually have access to all the infinite knowledge of this whole gurus of that Parampara. And that goes back to the most ancient. That is why Sri Ramakrishna, all the avatars, they are not, they represent the knowledge of the ancient, the most ancient of Purushas or ancient of Ishwaras in this age, which can be understood. That also through a Guru Parampara, it comes down and it is given. That is why in yoga, it is so important that one should get knowledge only from a parampara of teachers. Because if you don't have somebody who is slightly superior to you, you can never learn. The moment you learn that, you become ready or fit for a higher knowledge. Then you have to go to his guru. I mean, guru's guru, like that it goes, and finally it ends at Ishvara. So no knowledge can come without this teacher or without this parampara. That is why that connection has to be maintained. So Swamiji says, it is true as the modern philosopher says, that there is something in man which evolves out of him. They don't know. Modern philosophers just say that knowledge, people, they sometimes believe that people come with a clean slate, which is not true. If all people had come, then all would be equally talented. And they believe that because somebody has got a better environment, he has become more intelligent. And because somebody was not favored, no matter how good environment you give him, if there is no teacher to raise his level of knowledge, he can't succeed in life. So certain environments are necessary to call it out, no doubt. But that knowledge which is in man, that is modern philosophers say that something in man which evolves, they don't know what it is. So they say we cannot find that knowledge without somebody evoke or somebody taking it out of us. That knowledge is there, deeply hidden, but and it is present in everybody, because we are part of that whole creation, that cosmic mind. But a higher mind has to come to spark it, and or maybe to create a spark, that so that that knowledge is discovered. The knowledge has to be discovered yourself. All realizations, all the siddhis, those Sri Ramakrishna and all his gurus, they came, but the sadhana had to be done by the disciple. It's not that the guru can just the teacher can just instigate you to bring out that knowledge from within. He can create the right environment. He can create the right mindset. So according to Patanjali, we cannot find any knowledge without teachers who are superior to us. If there are men teachers, God teachers, angel teachers, you go to any level. If you don't believe that men can be good teachers, and then some people want, no, I shall directly go to the deity. I have my Ganesha, I have my these gods and demigods, and I think they will come in a strange way. They will come and give me some intuition. It may be true. So, but however great they may be, the God teachers, the angels, there are many scriptures where they say angel came and gave this knowledge. But is that knowledge infinite? No. They are all limited. Who was the teacher before them? That question will arise. That angel, whoever, or that small God who came and give you a Vani, they say in some of the Puranas, they say some strange light came, and or some being came from the skies and said, do this is knowledge, and he gave a limited knowledge, and then he preached it all over the world, if he was powerful enough, if that angel was powerful enough. But even that is limited. Patanjali does not accept that these angels or these demigods can give you unlimited knowledge. They can help you, they can take you up to a certain loka or a certain state of mind, but beyond that they are also powerless, or they are limited. Not powerless, they may be more powerful than the others. So the question is He says by deduction, we have to ask then who was the teacher of those angels? Why not I go to that? Why should I be satisfied with a post graduation? Why should I not do PhD? If I do PhD, why not postdoc? So we are forced to accept, to come to this conclusion that there should be at least one teacher who is not limited by time. And that conclusion leads us to this conception of Ishvara. So by worshipping that Ishvara, why we worship lower gods? If we worship lower gods, we'll get lower benefits. And after some time that will be exhausted. As he says, karma vipaka. Vipaka means the actions will have an end. We do certain rituals, we do certain pujas. Definitely they have their results. And that is what Nachiketa's father was trying to do. He wanted to go to heaven. So he was creating a Nachiketa Agni. And he got hold of certain mantras and he was doing. But Nachiketa was wiser. He said, what will happen? My father is such an ignorant person. And that also he is not doing it properly. He's supposed to give gifts because these rituals, they don't yield fruit if it is not done properly. You want to get a temporary result, you have to do it properly. And he was donating old cows. There it has been written that you have to give the best things you have. I don't keep the best things for myself and give the useless things as gift. Then the yajna, that for fire worship which he was doing and giving gifts to brahmanas and all the people, that would not bear fruit. So he was telling, leave alone getting infinite knowledge, you will not even go to heaven. So his father gets angry. That's why he gets angry. He says, who are you to tell me? I am your father. I taught you all these things. Don't teach me. He was having limited knowledge, but Nachiketa was not happy. He said, no, I want to go to a teacher who can teach me the secret of death. That's why he was very happy when his father said, he tells his father, you are giving all these old cows which are of no use. At least if you give me, I'll be more useful to these people. So whom are you giving me? It was absolutely, this father thought it was an arrogant statement his son was making. How can he teach me these things? He's pointing out my faults. So he says, then he once or twice he just ignores him. Third time when Nachiketa says, Father, I am definitely better than this old cow. I'll be of some use. Why don't you give me in gift? At least you will go to heaven. Then he gets angry. Then he says, whom are you giving me? Then he says, I'm giving you to the god of death. He was so angry with him. I mean, he just wanted to tell that you die. So he says, you have to, I will give you to the god of death. But since his father said that, he said, okay, you are my guru, because he was in fact teaching him. So I have to accept. You might have cursed me, but this is a good thing that has happened, in fact. So because anyway, I wanted a superior teacher who can teach me the ultimate truth. I don't want to go to heaven by giving these old cows and all these useless gifts. So I'm better off there to go to the real person who knows the secret of death, because Yama is the one who actually deals with death. So he must be knowing the life beyond death. What is the life? If there is an eternal life, he should be knowing it, because he is the one who is ruling over the most important thing in our life, that is death. So then he goes and then he gets the highest knowledge of Atman. Now, what is the symbol of this Ishvara? According to Patanjali, in Vedanta we have Brahman, and then we have a Shabda Brahman, that is Om. We have the concept of Shabda Brahman. So all mantras start with Om. We have a Om, then we have a Bija, that is a Tantric and Vedantic sadhana. And then there is an Ishta. What is the reason? Because we don't want to consider our Ishta as somebody who is a deity like this smaller deity or angel. If he is an angel, he is not going to be of any help to us. That's why we put the Om, because Tasya Vachaka Pranava, his manifesting word is Om. Now, to understand this is a very important sutra. To understand this, we have to understand why so much importance is given to this word Om. Why some other alphabet could have been taken. Some people say Amen and other things which come in other, but they are all derivations. Why Om is so special? Swamiji is explaining that. And if you have to have a symbol, because without symbol, man cannot think. So unlimited knowledge, I understood. Unlimited in time, Guru of Gurus, the ancient Guru, that is Ishvara. But how can I grasp that Ishvara? So to grasp that Ishvara, we have this Vachaka. Vachaka means manifesting word, describing word. So he can be described, though he is not Om, but he's described as Om. One of the qualities as infinitude, infinite knowledge is one quality. Infinity in time, most ancient one is another quality. But 27th verse says Tasya. Tasya means Ishvara. Ishvarasya. Vachakaha. Manifesting word is Om. So Swamiji says every idea, because this is the idea of Ishvara is also an idea. Animals don't have an idea of Ishvara. Plants do not have. Stones do not have. It is only the human mind which can conceive of the infinite, can conceive of Ishvara. But see, Patanjali is so logical that everything, every idea that comes to your mind, you just bear in mind this fact. The moment you think of fire, it may be in English, or you may say Agni, or you may say Aag in Hindi, but some word is connected with that object. So you have an idea of fire, but to convey it, I should use some word. Otherwise, how will you understand? If I just make you signs, a dumb person, he may make signs, but he has to make some signs to convey certain things to you. Otherwise, you will say a dumb person cannot express himself. So every idea in your mind has a counterpart in that word. So that word, for example, you say fire, but only people who know English will understand. But if you say fire to a person who has never heard English, he will not understand. You have to say Agni. So corresponding to every idea, not only every object, of course, Nama and Rupa, every form has a name, but even an idea has a name. So when you say, I am unhappy or I am miserable, to express that miserable, to express the idea of being in a particular state of mind, you have to say, I am miserable. But because I know English, I'll say miserable. In some other word, it can be something else. Dukkha in Sanskrit. I am dukhi. So in English, you'll say, I am miserable, I am unhappy. There are so many words there which indicate different things, different ideas. So that's why Swamiji says the word and the thought behind the word, they are inseparable. So when you say fire, it means only one thing for a person who knows the word fire, who knows English. Similarly, a Sanskrit person or somebody else who knows Hindi, he will say Agni. That means that is also fire, Aag. The external part of one and the same thing is what we call the word. Word is the external part. The internal part is what is represented by the external part. So if Ishvara is there, he should have an external part. Ishvara is one word, but the best word which describes him is Om. So now to understand this is very important. Swamiji gives a wonderful analysis. I think we have some 6 minutes. I'll try, but we will have to continue this. It is a very, very long discussion. This connection between the name and the symbol representing the idea and the symbol representing it. And then he also explains to say that why is Om the most suitable? Why can't we say anything else? And why can't we represent Ishvara? Why Vachaka? The name for that is Om. To understand that, Swamiji gives a wonderful background first. Otherwise, logically, you can't prove that Om is the best. Some person may come and say, why Om? It can be something else. So the idea Swamiji says that language was created by men has proved to be wrong. Some of the philosophers in the West believed that some people sat together and they said, from tomorrow we'll call this apple. It's not like that. Language is not developed like that. You know, it has come. It has come. Some people sitting together and deciding upon some words is a wrong theory. It has been proved it is wrong. So, as long as man has existed, as long as a human being has existed, there have been words and there has been a language. And we have to find out what is the connection between, because the ideas were there. If the idea was there, then the word was there. It's not that they just ideas were there without any words and then they suddenly said we will from tomorrow we will start naming. They all came together in a meeting. That is a very foolish idea, that from tomorrow we will start. They started from every object. This is a stone. This no. This the moment the object was there, the moment that idea was there, the moment that thought was there, the word was there. That's why Bible says in the beginning was the word, not the idea. Beginning was the word. The word was with God and the word was God. You see, such a profound statement Jesus makes, and it is just a reflection of what Patanjali said ages ago. He said, Tasya Vachaka Pranava. In the beginning was Om. In the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. So Ishvara and the word cannot be separated. Now, later on, we'll come to the conclusion why Om is. But at least we should know this. What is the connection between an idea and the word? Although we see that there must always be a word connected with one particular thought, it is not necessary that the same thought requires the same word. Now, this is a very important concept to understand. I gave you the example. There are 15 languages. There is one word associated with a particular thought, but the same thought does not require a same word. It can be different words. That is why the language is different. The thought may be same, whether a Englishman thinks something, a European thinks something. Everybody in the world has a language, but depending on his thought, the language has developed, the vocabulary has developed. So we must have a word to express each thought, but these words need not necessarily be the same. Sounds will vary according to different cultures, different nations. But our commentator here in Patanjali, commentator is Vyasa. He says, although the relation between thought and word is perfectly natural, the connection is natural. Every thought has a corresponding word, but that doesn't mean the connection is rigid. It can vary. There may be several words expressing the same thought between the sound and one idea. These sounds vary, yet the relation between the sounds and the thoughts is a absolutely natural one. Nobody will think twice if he knows that language. When you say fire, Agni, he will mean Agni. He knows. You don't have to tell, because that idea is associated with the word Agni and it is there in the cosmic mind. So the connection between thoughts and sound is good only if there is any real connection between the thing signified, that is fire, and the symbol. Until then, that symbol will never come into general use. Because there was a fire and many people started calling it Agni, because it was always associated with that, it will remain for eternity in that particular language. A symbol is the manifester of the thing signified. So a symbol here, in this case Om, is the manifester of the thing signified. It signifies Ishvara, Ishvara of yoga, mind you. And that Ishvara of yoga is signified by this Om for time, from time immemorial. And that is why it cannot be separated. So we'll come to the discussion later on. So if the thing signified has already an existence, and if by experience we know that the symbol has been expressed many times in the past, then we are sure that there is a eternal real relation between them, between Om, because this has been used. Whenever we said Om, it meant Brahman, it meant the supreme Ishvara. In the case, they don't accept Brahman, they may say it is Purusha. But somehow this Vachaka, Pranava, Tasya vachaka pranava means the idea expressed by that infinite Brahman, pure consciousness or pure Purusha, untouched by Prakriti, was and will always be Om. So they are symbols. As you say, as I said, in different languages it may be different. Everybody may not accept this word Om, but for people who have certain idea, a thought of Ishvara, as according to yoga, according to Vedanta, also here Vedanta and yoga are agreeing on one point, that whether you call him Brahman or Purusha, it is Om. And even Buddhism accepts. Om is a very precious word. So it could not be separated. This idea of Ishvara, or the idea of all-knowing God, the idea of a universal mind, whether you take the Ishvara of the Vedanta, where he is the cosmic mind, the universal mind, but the same thing is expressed in Patanjali as all-knowing, the nature of the all-knowingness. That is so, but it has been given one symbol, and that is Om. Even if things are not present, there will be thousands who will know the thing. He may not be able to conceive the thought behind the symbol, but he will repeat. So that's why they say, even if you are not do a mechanical repetition, just do japa, just say Om, Om, Om. In fact, if you go to Valmiki's Ramayana, he had never uttered the word Rama. You can't expect a robber who is killing people. He knew only that vocabulary which was useful for his profession, that is killing people. So Mara means a enemy. To kill, sorry, Mara means to kill. So when Narada came and told him, please repeat Rama, you will be free from all the problems. Valmiki said, I never repeated Rama, so I don't know, I can't repeat it. It is like trying to teach some foreign alphabet to a child. Then it struck Narada that somehow he has to be made to repeat Rama. It is known as the Taraka mantra, Rama, Rama. Like Om, that is another name which is associated with divinity. So I said, can you repeat Mara? Mara, Mara. Oh, yes, yes. Mara is a word which he used so often. He said, okay, start with Mara. And as he repeated, as he did japa, even mechanically, he started repeating Rama, and there was a transformation. So the thing signified, whether you know whether it signifies Ishvara or not, if it has been repeated millions and millions of times by several people in whose mind there was a complete knowledge or not, we do not know. Everybody, when they repeat Om, don't think that it represents Ishvara, because many people don't even know why should we repeat Om. But even if they mechanically repeat, Swamiji says, you will somehow slowly be led to that God, because there is an eternal connection. The commentator says, that's why the commentator means the commentator who is Vyasa, and there are many. Bhoja also wrote a commentary on Patanjali Sutras. The sutras are so difficult to understand. So he says, the commentator says, the manifesting word of God is Om. Why does he why does he emphasize this word? Now, this is a very big discussion. I will not, Swamiji gives the scientific reason why the whole sound production system starts with the larynx, starts with the throat, goes to the palate, and then lips. All the alphabets are covered in that area. When you utter a sound, you are using, it starts from the throat. So we'll come to that because it requires it's a very long discussion. Why this Om? Om is, as you all know, made of A is the root, U and Ma. Ma, you need lips. So when the sound comes out, Ma is the last thing. It's as it were, it finishes the sound. Om, Om. So to say you don't even have to use your mouth. It comes from the throat. When you say oo, you have to use the top of your mouth, palate. And then when you say ma, the lips, you can say and oo without even closing the lips. But when you say ma, you have to close. So from the throat to the mouth, to the lips, the whole sound production system. That's the reason why Om was chosen to be representative of all the words, all the alphabets, because all the sounds are they are condensed in seed form in this Om. That is the idea. So we will come to that discussion. If there are some questions, I'll just see. Yeah. The chat, just trying to see the chat. The first question is, okay, it's a very big question. Maybe I'll take it. It's klesha and all these things will come. Vrittis I've explained. So I think what is the question which is being asked is, can you please explain emotions and feelings in perspective of Patanjali Yoga Sutra? What is the relationship with vrittis, kleshas, and the four components of the antakarana, manas, buddhi, and all this? Yeah, that is fine. How emotions function. So the word klesha, we will not discuss this because it will require one whole talk. And the klesha has not come. Tasya Vach Pranav, when we come to the second chapter, all with great detail, the ideas of vrittis we have already discussed, but kleshas and then all the other, the four components of antakarana, chitta, and all this thing, they will come, because the second part, the first part is defining the goal. First, they give the goal. What is samadhi? What is Ishvara? Then we'll come to the sadhana pada. That means how to actually perform sadhana. We know what Om is, but then what is the benefit of practicing pranava or Om, or how it affects the kleshas, what are the kleshas, that is emotions. So all these things we'll discuss in a future class. If a person is initiated into a parampara, does she automatically get the spiritual protection of all the gurus in that tradition? Yes, definitely. That is what this prayer said. This prayer means that yo brahmanam, we have to do that. We have to have that spirit, that it's not my guru alone, because he has got his strength from a higher guru, and it has gone directly to that Ishvara, the Ishvara of yoga, or the Ishvara of Vedanta, whichever Ishvara you accept, who is the incarnation, who is our Ishta. In fact, our Ishta, the role of guru is to take you to the Ishta. So that means we definitely get not spiritual protection. You may say protection is one of the functions. It's not just, it's to elevate the disciple. The guru and the mantra role is to elevate, not just to protect. By protection, we have a narrow conception of protection, that when I am in trouble, the god and somebody should come. But what is trouble? Is it just gross trouble? Is it losing a few pounds? Is it the protection to protect your money? Some people once said that I do Hanuman Chalisa because Hanuman will always stand guard, and whenever I go out, I always do Hanuman Chalisa because I have a lot of precious things in my home, and I believe that Hanuman will guard it. That means he will protect it. That's not the idea. Hanuman has much better things to do in life. He never, even the necklace which was given by Sita, he said there is no Rama in this, so he threw it away. So it is ridiculous to imagine that God will come and protect our jewelry or all these things. No doubt we get a feeling, we depend on him for everything. In all our small tasks, we try to see the presence of God. That is the benefit. But that doesn't mean that he has to always solve or protect. In that sense, you can't say that the whole parampara protects you. But definitely it protects your spirituality. That is true. The spiritual values, though the materially you may not understand that, definitely you have mentioned here, automatically get the spiritual protection. Definitely you will get the spiritual protection. That is assured, because once you are connected to a vast reservoir of spirituality, then definitely you will get the benefits of that water. That water is for you to use. Next is uh, Simer Majhe Asim Tumi. According to Patanjali, Tagore says, unlimited can be conceived by mind. Okay, fine. Uh, Sri Ramakrishna believed in Puran, Vedanta or Patanjali. He believed in everything. You see, it is just a system of thought. Now, Rabindranath Tagore, being a poet, is expressed in a poetic way. If there is some Bengali song, poet, he will express in a different way. Gujarati poet, uh, Narsim Mehta has said, Akhila Brahmandama Ekatu Sri Hari. He says, I see the same Hari in that fruit also, the mango which is hanging there. In Junagadh, there are a lot of mangoes. He says, I see Krishna in every mango. So, trying to see the infinite in the finite is not unique to Patanjali alone. It is there in the Puranas also. It is there in everything. It is there in Tagore. Tagore has also taken from Upanishads. So, trying to see the finite, infinite in the finite is a unique characteristic of man. The idea of moksha itself, only human beings can have. That's why they say it is very precious that human life, when you have become a human, don't aspire for animal gains, aspire for the highest, the unlimited. Because limited things you will get, just like animals and plants, they get limited. They are protected by God. Limited protection God does. Every tree is protected. Every animal is protected. Somehow or the other, nature provides it with food and other things. But that is not the kind of gross protection that we see. We are not satisfied with the limited, we want unlimited. So, trying to see the unlimited in limited is the nature of our sadhana. That is okay. And the last is, what is the meaning of finite God? Does it refer to deities? Yes. So, this finite gods means deities worshipped with the intention. If you worship any deity with the intention of attaining infinitude, if you consider them as the representation of Brahman, even a Shivalinga, a simple stone, but if you consider that it is infinite, then it is not a deity anymore. But when I say deity, what I mean is the smaller deities. You want money, you worship. Many people say, no, no, I will worship Lakshmi, because they feel Lakshmi is actually, if you see in the broader sense, she is Divine Mother alone. It's not that she will give you money. But if you narrow that concept and think that deity refers to certain powers which you want prosperity, you want money, you will worship Lakshmi. You want some other things, you worship some other deity or God. But that same God, if you worship as infinite, it can give you infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite existence. Okay? So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.